many different options right now. And, I can probably bet that when you are considering a night with your spouse, and you want to eat at a full service restaurant, you're probably not going to go to something like TGI Fridays. Or if you do, that selection is just not going to happen maybe as often as it did 15 years ago. And that's been sort of a problem. But the other thing that you mentioned was the capital structure. And that's where I kind of fault a lot of these companies, because Fridays, if I understand correctly, Friday's capital structure was developed in like 2017. And I could have told you in 2017 that you do not want to put a lot of debt onto a casual dining restaurant, just because of the way things were going. So a lot of these companies understand the significant risks. Obviously, TGI Fridays had no idea that COVID was hitting. None of us did. If we knew, we would have acted a lot differently. But I could have told, as your point, they were in decline for a long time. Bar and grill chains were in steep decline for a long time on balance. There's no growth in that business. And then just to load up a company like that with the amount of debt that it has really is just a danger.
There's a trend here too in some of the recent casual dining bankruptcies where the owner was not a restaurant operator. In this case, it's a private equity company. And in the case of Red Lobster, it was a seafood supplier who had never operated restaurants. That seems notable. There are full service dining chains that are doing well, like you said, and they're owned and operated by restaurant experts. That probably doesn't get talked about enough. The other thing that we probably don't talk about enough is the areas where these restaurants are located have changed a lot. And I think full service chains in particular are sort of have this symbiotic relationship with retailers. And we know retail has struggled. Malls are not doing well as a result of, online shopping, et cetera. And that's pulled down a lot of the full service chains too. And I think in TGI Fridays case, the places where a lot of these restaurants were located are no longer generating the traffic they need. People still do go out to eat. We know that because there are full service chains that are doing well. But if there's no one around your restaurant, it's not going to survive. Doesn't matter what it is.
Oh no, yeah, that's very true. This entire generation of restaurants. Now, one of the issues that Fridays had, and it's the same issue that we saw at Ruby Tuesday and O'Charlie's and brands of that ilk, is that in the 80s and 90s, everybody was going crazy over these types of concepts. I remember when, I remember the first time I went to TGI Fridays. That location, it no longer exists. But it was a fun restaurant. The waiter was obnoxious, which we thought was hilarious at the time. Apparently, we love obnoxious waiters with all these buttons that were mocked in the phenomenal movie Office Space. And then they had just kitsch on the walls and all that other stuff. And we all, and they grew up with the mall culture and were a distinct part of it. And then to your point, the mall culture declined. But the other issue is, and it's a real lesson for a lot of restaurant chains today. We had this issue. We talked about it a lot when we first really started to see casual dining numbers struggle before the Great Recession, by the way. And you really saw same-store sales struggle. Ruby Tuesday was sort of the first one to really see significant issues before the pandemic, and it was sort of a canary in the coal mine. And they're a fraction. They're a fraction of their peak size, closed units after units after units. But we talked about a sea of sameness. all of these brands looked the same. All of them looked the same. There was little difference between Chili's and Applebee's and TGI Fridays and Ruby Tuesday. They were just way, way similar. And it's a lesson. I mean, we've seen it over and over again in all sorts of brands. I mean, look at fast casual pizza. We had all these fast casual pizza chains emerge, and they all look the same. We, had frozen yogurts emerge, and they all look the same. We had these cookie concepts emerge. They all look the same. You know what? If you're starting a concept based on another guy's idea, you know what? Maybe change it a little bit. Because what it's done, the bar and grill sector, is just destroyed it. I mean, Red Robin is a little bit more burger focused, but it looked relatively the same. We had just way too many of these concepts out there. And then, the industry is always changing and evolving and things like that. And, people come up with this idea over here or that idea over here, but maybe more to the point, people just really get tired of eating the same thing all the time. They maybe want to go to a specialist over here, or they want, they weren't eating out. They're not taking their time at lunch anymore is one of the other elements here. They lost a lot of their lunch business. And so that lunch business went over to, Chipotle noodles. Well, maybe not noodles, but, Chipotle and Kava and Sweet Green, whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot in there, but it was a really, they're a little bit, the brands, this is sort of a long time coming, things like this, because they were just too many of them. And then just people have so many other different options. Why wouldn't they go to them?
Yeah. The question then is like, how does TGI Fridays, where do they go from here? We haven't had a lot of really great examples of like a casual dining chain sort of dying like this and then coming back. We could say Chili's, but I don't know if I would say that they completely hit rock bottom. I think they were headed in a bad direction, and their new management over there has turned them around. But I don't know what you do with TGI Fridays at this point. And one of the curious things to me about this is that they had this new CEO about a year ago that they hired, and he had some ideas. He wanted them to start serving sushi, and he had ideas about how to change the appetizer menu and the bar menu and make it exciting again, kind of lean into the experiential part of its heritage. It started as like this fun bar with the bartenders, flipping the cups in the air, et cetera. And within a few weeks of that sort of announcement, he was replaced. And I don't know what happened there, but it was like they were about to embark on this turnaround, and then it was snuffed out.
Well, they probably looked at the stupid sushi idea and just ousted them because I forgot about that. TGI Fridays adding no. Let's just make that particularly clear. A brand like TGI Fridays should never add sushi. I'm sorry. Just and I guess the thing is, like, so we mentioned Chili's, and Chili's capital structure was nowhere near as bad. One of the issues on some of these brands is that eventually, and this is what happened. This is what happened with Red Lobster a decade ago, and it's a similar thing to what happened with TGI Fridays. They just use a different format for doing this, but essentially, when a private equity firm takes over a company, they make a calculation. Their goal is to make money. And look, private equity companies, they exist for that purpose. Anybody who is ever expecting a private equity firm to be, just good stewards of whatever, and think about the long term is really just really, they're not philanthropists. They're not in the business of preserving the long-term health of anything. You probably get some private equity firms whose job it is to preserve the long-term health of stuff. That is not what they exist for. It's like asking, it's like asking a termite not to eat wood. Their job is to make money. Period. End of discussion. And how
And they
they
don't
make
have any
money is
restaurant experience. They don't run restaurants, which
no, but they don't run restaurants. But their job is to invest. Their job is to invest. If we always think anybody always thinks about private equity firms, think of money, but that's what their job is. Those people that work at private equity firms, they are paid based on how much their clients are paid, right? So when a private equity firm buys a company, they make a calculation. How are we going to make money off of this business? And maybe they're going to make money off of growth. And so then they invest heavily in growth, sometimes way too much. And we've had problems, they cause problems any number of ways. One of the ways they cause problems that we don't really talk about very much is that they will invest in these growth chains and then just really push growth, because in 5 years, they need to get a return and they need to show that that brand grew. And sometimes it gets too aggressive. Sometimes the brand, it makes a bunch of mistakes to try to get growth, and then that causes problems. We saw it with like Mod Pizza and whatnot, where you get these investors that just like push very aggressive growth, and they end up growing stupidly. And a lot of the bankruptcies that are happening today are done not because of over leverage, but because of stupid growth. So it was why we see a lot of these in the fast casual space, and a lot of problems that are not end up in bankruptcy outside of this. But they make a calculation, and it's the same calculation that TGI Fridays made in 2017, same as that Golden Gate made with Red Lobster a few years earlier, which is that they are not going to make money off growth on these brands. That is not how they're going to make money. And they made the decision that the way they're going to make money is by leverage. And so, and that's what they do. And effectively, and one of the key point that you made is, these brands have issues because they're over levered, and the restaurant industry just has a lot of companies out there that just have way too much. They have too many leases that are too expensive, which is what happened in Red Lobster's case. And then they have too much debt, which is what happened in TGI Fridays case. And then you end up with a world-changing event like COVID-19. And by the way, these things happen with regularity. The industry always goes through periods in which people, for whatever reason, because of the economy or whatever, you name your reason, there's always periods where people just start cutting back on chain restaurant dining. It happens regularly. This was going to happen whether COVID happened or not. COVID just sped it up because these companies have too much leverage. And right now, we don't have anybody set to buy them. Nobody wants to touch TGI Fridays with a 10-foot pole because it operates too many of their own restaurants and too many of their own full-service restaurants in a sector that's in long-term decline. So, yeah, that's my long speech on this is, this was sort of set up to fail from the get-go, I think. And the only issue here is that Tri-Artisan couldn't find a buyer early enough
after multiple attempts.
Yeah, they've been trying to do something with this for ages. I believe
they tried to go public. That didn't work. Then this most recent sale fell through. I mean, it's just been a mess.
Yeah. I mean, the good news here, Joe, is that probably the whole post-pandemic environment saved the public from having to invest in this thing. I sound bad because the thing is, like,
the drink half full there.
I am not known for my over optimism, but I mean, look, you mentioned Chili's. I mean, and this is, I guess, one of the frustrating things about seeing situations like this. Brands can actually go out there and with the right level of marketing and the right level of investment and really just some smart management and, a bit of luck. Let's face it. A lot of what's happened with Chili's this year is luck. I don't think that they had anything to do with the social media tailwind that they've had, which has been amazing for them, but they've just known how to take advantage of it. And so, I mean, the issue is you can succeed in a market like this with a full service chain restaurant. You just have to focus, number one, on what you already do well, right? And that's what Chili's does. You focus on, and and then you just put forth the right advertising. By the way, Kevin Hochman better send me like a Christmas card this year because of all the time I spend on this podcast gushing about his chain's performance.
It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they've kind of created a playbook, for other brands, but they figured out how to resonate with the modern dining audience, the people who will go to full service restaurants. And I don't think TGI Fridays is doing that. I mean, many aren't, but it's a marketing question, and
Mm-hmm.
Fridays seems to have gotten so far away from its origins as a fun bar. I mean, it started as a bar, and only later did it turn into a full service restaurant and kind of help to create that category. But that might be part of the issue here, is that it's just so far from what it was initially envisioned to be that it's kind of, the message is muddled.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder if part of the problem, and I've actually mentioned this is the one part of the problem, is that the kids don't drink at bars anymore.
That's
As
a
much
huge
as maybe
problem
they
for
used
full
to,
service.
just sit there and drink home alone, drink home by themselves and order delivery. Or maybe, just invite some friends over and order delivery, which actually might be a problem for a chain like that. But I mean, yeah, your point is, this was about, this company was about having fun, going out, having a good time. And that's really what this bar and grill business was all about. You go, you enjoy yourself, and that's it. But look at what Chili's did with their marketing. I mean, they marketed value and not just low prices. They marketed what you get for your money, which is a really key point for them. And so they knew the right way to market today for today's consumers, and it's really helped them out a lot.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So now we see it's not just TGI Fridays, by the way. We had an Applebee's small. It's only an 8-unit franchisee, but we've had an 8-unit Applebee's franchisee. We have had some issues with the Applebee's system in the past few years. We've seen a couple of bankruptcies, one or two not insignificant bankruptcies. We know that their sales have flatlined, badly underperforming rival Chili's, which to me is discouraging and worth noting. We got Ruby Tuesday, Red Robin, which has had new management, and now they're facing an activist investor. They're having a tough time really gaining traction with their comeback, even though they have some really solid management at that company. Mm-hmm. So we've got some real issues really within the full service dining segment for sure. Mm-hmm. Overall. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this brings us sort of into the present, where consumers are fed up with inflation. Mm-hmm. They only have so much to spend, and so when they are going to go out to eat, they're going to be very picky, and they're not just going to say, "Oh, let's go to TGI Fridays tonight," just because. They're going to make a real deliberate decision about where they go, where they know they're going to have a good experience, good service, the food's going to be good, and it's going to be affordable. So it's a really tough balancing act to hit all those things. And that's why we're seeing so much traffic get concentrated to a small number of brands right now that are nailing it. There's just only so much to go around. Then on top of that, you layer in the significant shift to off-premise dining, which is not full service's forte. and there's a smaller pie for the same number of brands that we had before the pandemic and before all this inflation. So if you're not operating well, you just it's not going to work right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that is absolutely true. You've got to get everything right today.
Yeah.
People are, people in environments like this, they get really picky. And so the brands that really got their marketing right, they really have their operations right, they've got their food right, they get lucky. I mean, we do have, luck definitely plays a role. And if anybody is going to, that's just realistic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get this combination of things right, you're going to be able to get customers. And if you can't really do that, you face some significant challenges. And again, we go back to the Fridays deal. If you have too much leverage, periods like this are brutal and really, really brutal. And and that's what we're seeing. We the brands that have all filed for bankruptcy, we've had a lot of them. Every single one of them have had something in common, which is basically that they have got too much leverage. And by leverage, I mean they either have too many expensive leases or they have too much debt. And
no margin for error in that situation.
Yeah. It's what it's always what Warren Buffett always used to say, that recessions are like when the tide goes out, and you find out who's not wearing shorts.
Yep.
And that's essentially what we're seeing now. Is we're seeing a lot of brands that have had some issues. And maybe the pandemic kind of kept some of these companies alive, or some of the pandemic assistance that we saw kept a lot of companies alive for a while, and now we're just seeing that. So it's just an interesting period. And then I also think right now a lot of lower income consumers are not eating out as much as they used to, and I think that casual dining chains are suffering from it.
Yeah. It's just so many factors. I mean, we've been talking for I don't know how long now. We've probably listed 8 to 10 different reasons that we've gotten to this place. It's just a perfect storm of things that are converging here this year.
Yeah. Do we have an idea what's going to happen with Fridays? I mean, I think that's fascinating, because the other thing that we never really didn't talk about is the type of financing they use, which is a whole business securitization.
Well,
and by the way, before you comment on that, that's the first time we've seen a failed whole business securitization in the restaurant space ever.
From my understanding, and this is probably good to point out, the whole business securitization is related to the franchisees, and it is actually not part of this filing.
Right.
This bankruptcy only pertains to the TGI Fridays corporate entity that operates 50-something restaurants. And so the franchisees are actually not included in this. And the whole business securitization is like a whole different problem that is like a whole, can of worms of its own. I think what will probably happen here is we'll probably see some more closures of the corporate locations, which we've already seen many this year. And that'll help them, get their finances in order, and then someone will buy them, and who knows what happens from there. You just hope it's someone who's intent on fixing things. But it's kind of an unusual situation, I guess.
It is. And my guess, if you wanted my guess as to what happens, is that the buyer ends up being a franchisee, and that and essentially becomes a franchisee. The franchise company, the securitization keeps the brand alive. I mean, the brand will survive, obviously, but TGI Fridays, that entity is no longer, doesn't control a large portion of its brand, which is problematic. So they don't control any of the franchise entity and brand name. So the brand name will stay with the franchisee, the franchise or the franchise company. And then whoever ends up buying it will just operate the restaurants. But I probably can guarantee you, I don't think there'll be a hefty market for, I mean, maybe as a franchisee, you might get some franchisees hoping to pick up restaurants for cheap, but boy, it's just not going to be.
That would be a good outcome here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there are some good operators in this system, from what I understand. I gotta say, I've been to the TGI Fridays at the Dallas airport a couple times. It is a fantastic restaurant. Both times I've been there, just the service is great. It's probably, I don't know if that, probably not a franchisee. It's probably whatever the airport operator is. But all that is to say, like, it's not like this is a rotten chain. It's all the things we've just said. So hopefully, some one of their better operators can scoop it up and turn it around. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll see. Joe, this is great. Really appreciate you joining me on the podcast, Talk Fridays.
Thanks for having me.
And that should do it for this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, which was edited, as always, by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening. Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions like, how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com.